as a system integrator, many times I have to go to manufacturing plants to do controls for their process. One place I go a lot is foundries. And foundries, they have a process that they go about, which I think is very imperative for us to take on a spiritual level. So this is what a foundry does. The first step in the process is to gather the scrap. So a company will go out and buy scrap metal from a recycling yard, kind of like the place that you would go to take your used aluminum cans. It's a recycling place that you take all your metal there, and they separate it between aluminum or steel or copper or whatever metals you have. It's scrap. It's discarded contents of whatever kind, and they separate it out in the recycling center. And the concept there, a recycling center is really the disregarded aspects of our society. The cars that aren't useful anymore go there. Like I said, recycling cans. Just anything that we don't want anymore, we take it to a scrapyard, and the scrapyard scraps it. And scrap is basically what we don't want. And I think there's a symbolism there with us. I think a lot of times we feel as if our life has brought us to a point where we are scrap, and we've just been tossed aside by the world into a scrap pile, a scrap heap. We're nothing more than occupants of a recycle yard. The discarded of the world. So a company will take this scrap metal and bring it into their plant, and they take this scrap and they put it in a furnace. And the furnace gets hot enough to melt this scrap into what they call a bath. It's basically just molten metal. And an interesting thing happens when you heat up metal. All the impurities, all the imperfections, all the nicks, the rips, the tears, the dents, everything about the metal, all the dirt that's in it, all the imperfections, impurities, rise to the surface. We call that dross, or the term that we use in the industry is slag. And we'll go through a process in the melting where we take the slag off. We call it slagging out. So you take that top layer, all the stuff that you don't need, and you cast it aside. And so that the only thing that's left in this bath is the actual pure metal of whatever foundry they're making, whether it's steel or whatever. Just pure metal with no imperfections, no impurities, no dirt. And to me, I think that process is kind of like what God brings us through. There's a lot of times when we feel like there's no way we can be redeemed. There's no way us in our state of being a scrap could be useful again. You might feel like that rusty old pickup truck that's in someone's yard. But if you see that truck go through the process of going to a scrap yard and then being scrapped for parts and then being picked up by a huge electromagnet and then placed into a furnace and see it melt down, it's like a reset button. Not only does it become useful again, eventually, it becomes pure. And that's the processes of us as Christians. We go through that refining process. And I realize I've posted a blog about this before, but I really want to emphasize this fact. That's what a foundry does. It takes the discarded scrap metal and sends it to a process where it heats it up. Sometimes our life feels like it's being heated up in the process of becoming refined. And as those insecurities, and impurities of our life surface, God can take that layer of slag off. And the result is a pure reformation of what was originally intended. Now the next process after the steel making, or the melting down process, after the foundry, it gets cast into something useful again. And that's the analogy that the Bible uses, being in the potter's hands. And then God shapes us to what he would have us to do. Another reason I wanted to bring this up is because I work at the Foundry, and that's how they got their name, was the concept of the Foundry itself, the Foundry process in our economy. That's what they named themselves after, because that's the process. The residents there are going through that refining process. And it takes a while, it takes time, and it takes a lot of heat and comfort for those imperfections and impurities to surface. But in that process, we're becoming pure. So if this is where you find yourself right now, take heart, because you are in a process and you will become pure again.